Mr. Denham had come in as Mr. Fortescue, the eminent novelist, reached the middle of a very long sentence. He kept this suspended while the newcomer sat down, and Mrs. Hilbery deftly joined the severed parts by leaning towards him and remarking, "Now, what would you do if you were married to an engineer and had to live in Manchester, Mr. Denham?" "Surely she can learn Persian," broke in a thin, elderly gentleman. "Is there no retired schoolmaster or man of letters in Manchester with whom she could read Persian?" "A cousin of ours has married and gone to live in Manchester," Katharine explained. Mr. Denham muttered something, which was indeed all that was required of him, and the novelist went on where he had left off. Privately, Mr. Denham cursed himself very sharply for having exchanged the freedom of the street with a sophisticated drawing-room, where, among other disagreeables, he certainly would not appear at his best. He glanced round him and saw that, save for Katharine, they were all over 40, the only consolation being that Mr. Fortescue was a considerable celebrity, so that tomorrow one might be glad to have met him. "Have you ever been to Manchester?" he asked Katharine. "Never," she replied. "Why do you object to it, then?" Katharine stirred her tea, and seemed to speculate, so Denham thought, upon the duty of filling somebody else's cup. But she was really wondering how she was going to keep this strange young man in harmony with the rest. She observed that he was compressing his teacup, so that there was danger lest the thin china might cave inwards. She could see that he was nervous. One would expect a bony young man with his face slightly reddened by the wind, and his hair not altogether smooth, to be nervous in such a party. Further, he probably disliked this kind of thing, and had come out of curiosity, or because her father had invited him. Anyhow, he would not be easily combined with the rest. "I should think there would be no one to talk to in Manchester," she replied at random. Mr. Fortescue had been observing her for a moment or two, as novelists are inclined to observe, and at this remark he smiled, and made it the text for a little further speculation. "In spite of a slight tendency to exaggeration, Katharine decidedly hits the mark," he said, and lying back in his chair with his opaque contemplative eyes fixed on the ceiling and the tips of his fingers pressed together, he depicted first the horrors of the streets of Manchester, and then the bare, immense moors on the outskirts of the town, and then the scrubby little house in which the girl would live, and then the professors and the miserable young students devoted to the more strenuous works of our young dramatists, who would visit her, and how her appearance would change by degrees, and how she would fly to London, and how Katharine would have to lead her about, as one leads an eager dog on a chain past rows of clamorous butcher shops. Poor dear creature. "Oh, Mr. Fortescue," exclaimed Mrs. Hilbery as he finished, "I had just written to say how I envied her. I was thinking of the big gardens, and the dear old ladies in mittens who read